So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's roundtable session. Thank you for taking time out of your busy diaries to join us today. And hopefully it's a little bit cooler where you are. It's definitely not where I am, so it is still really, really hot. Many of you I know on the screen today, so hello to those that I do know. And Jill, obviously I'm working with you yesterday and today, so really good to have you on board. So just a little bit about me, so I'm Margaret Mullins, I work for the CCA as an independent global assessor. And prior to that, I worked at the Coventry Building Society as head of customer service. So before we kick off, just a little bit of housekeeping, if you don't mind. So the session is being recorded. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. So thank you for that as well. When you want to ask a question, do put your hand up. So hopefully you'll all know how to do that on Zoom by now. Put your hand up, and when you start to speak, when I let you in to speak, if you just say your name and where you come from, that would be great. In today's session, we'll also be having a poll, so we'll get probably halfway through the session and we'll have some polling questions to do. So what's today's session? So it's been sponsored by Medallia, with the topic for discussion, measuring to motivate, and how we analyse and empower with new metrics, for a post-pandemic world. We're really fortunate to have leading expert Rachel Lane from Partners Medallia join us today at this executive roundtable session, where we'll discuss the challenges and opportunities that arise when considering what post-pandemic measurement should look like and why, is now a good time to reassess our strategies. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Rachel so that she can share her views on the subject. Thank you, Rachel.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. And it's great to see so many faces, many of whom I already know. So appreciate everybody joining today. And as Margaret said, we're going to talk about measuring to motivate. So, in this post-pandemic world, it seems that everything has changed and there's certainly new pressures out there that we're needing to meet. So I've pulled just a few thoughts together to help us sort of distill our thoughts and maybe provoke a wider conversation. Let me just share my screen with you here and we can kick off. Hopefully you can see that. We all good? I think we okay.
That looks good, Rachel.
Great, thank you for that. So I thought I'd start with a few challenges and trends and look at, where we were 18 months ago and what our thoughts and our visions were, and certainly, from my role, I'm the contact center solution principal for Medallia. I spend a lot of my time with customers equally. I spend a lot of my time with analysts and with our product management team and our go-to-market. So when we're providing technology solutions into the market and into the contact centers, we're not just looking at what's happening today and the challenges that our customers have today. We're looking at, okay, so what's going to come next? What's going to come? And we used to say over the next 5 years. Of course, nobody knows what's happening over the next 5 years right now, but we certainly know what we're building towards over the next 12, 24, and potentially 36 months. So when I look at this, and I created this slide 18 months ago, probably now, to help us understand what the current challenges were and to start to think about some of the predictions that we're going to see going forward. So at this time, we were all starting to think about how we manage the work from home and how we return to work. And I think in good order, we've managed to achieve that across the board relatively well. I still think, at the moment, we're on 57% hybrid working, and I still think that's going to go up over the next 12, 24 months. But we're seeing some new trends that are coming to pass that we thought, we certainly would see. So we're seeing a lot more conversation around less full-time employees, more part-time employees, as our employees are coming to us and say, my work-life balance isn't as good as what I hoped it would be. I'd like to consider taking a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week, or perhaps that's a company thing that you're already trialing right now. So what that's creating for us is more of a gig economy. Ultimately, we see that we're going to be able to actually, for the first time, potentially meet some of those peak calling times in the contact center by, if we've got remote workers and flexible workers, having more people working in the evening, taking advantage of that wider market, having students, having working parents logging on in the evening for us as well. So our net is wider for employees, but certainly there's a lot more pressure within the contact center, downward pressure, and that's why we're going to talk about the metrics today. We're still seeing volume surges in the contact center. We're still seeing long calls, and we expected those long calls to be coming down. So the average call duration is still, in some sectors, up to 20% higher than where it was pre-pandemic. And part of that, of course, is that we're seeing much higher levels of agent attrition. So we've got younger, newer, I should say, agents that are still in training mode. So some of those are taking longer calls, but equally, we've got more vulnerable customers. We need to identify customers at risk. So on the front end of our operations, our agents are even more critical than ever. But the situation that we're looking to manage is, where are the challenges and where are the focus areas going forward? One of the things that I really look towards is, the analysis that's out there in the marketplace. And my desk is always full of surveys right across the board that people are doing that are maintaining and understanding the pulse of what's going out in the contact center, what's going on there right now. One that I particularly like, Strategic Contact, they do an annual survey. They ask 3 questions every year. 2 of those questions are the same every year, so they're able to trend. And I know at the CCA, you do lots of, and I've got a ton of the CCA work that you're doing, and I'm really excited about some of the work that you're currently doing and you've got coming forward to help us really understand what those key challenges are. Interestingly, the key challenge that we're seeing right now is the difficulty hiring. And of course, this is having a great deal of impact because of the high attrition rate that we already had. So we're seeing 41% of contact centers stated one of their key challenges was now recruiting, much higher than that's been previously. So we know that it's, the impact of attrition is much greater now than it ever was before. And yes, we've got that increase in workload. That high attrition rate is definitely impacting everybody. And that creates in itself an inability to achieve the service level consistently. So I think that, it's a great topic for us to talk about today. In terms of focus areas, we've got how do we improve that employee engagement and empowerment piece, because we know that is a key consideration for our agent retention. And also, how do we automate some of those processes so that there's less downward pressure on the front end of the contact center as well? And how do we then become flexible in our approach to productivity? How do we manage that workload going forward? And of course, self-service is key. And the contact center, if there's one thing that we've seen over the last 24, 36 months, is that the contact center is a real hub for data right across the organization. Deflection into the contact center will 9 times out of 10 tell us what's going wrong in other areas of the business. And I think it wasn't really until the pandemic that businesses start to invest in data collection and analysis in the contact center like we see it now. So that's leading to a trifecta of pain, as I'm calling it: the trouble to hire, the workload continuing to increase, and that high attrition. There's 2 scary numbers that I've got on here you've probably not seen before, because typically when we think about agent attrition, there's a number attached to it, somewhere between 12 and maximum £20,000 per agent. Actually, what I'm looking at here is the overall impact of the business. So if we're running 10% light in terms of that front line, which many contact centers are, and much more than that, what's the effect on CSAT, on NPS, on customer lifetime value, and bringing those numbers into this as well, because that is the actual cost of attrition in the front line. So we've got, for a junior, what we might call an unskilled agent answering simple questions, a cost of around 32k for every agent that leaves. And then for a senior agent, and I've particularly looked within the financial services sector because they're really struggling here, and it takes on average a year to fully train some of those frontline agents that are dealing with brokers, etc. So the cost for that rises up to 52,000. So this is huge, and it really gives us a great understanding of, the size of the issues. So let's turn to the benchmarking piece now, and some of the key ones that I'm seeing movement in, or I'm anticipating that there's a real downward squeeze on some of these. So average speed to answer, for example, I'm looking at around 28 seconds, according to all the reports that are coming in right now. And I don't know, certainly from my own personal experience, I would think it's higher than this right now. I haven't got the latest numbers on that, but I'd certainly, I think this is a topic to discuss, because I think when we're looking at those contact center leadership, they're looking at these types of metrics to understand their business. So I think that's a topic of conversation. Is that still realistic to have those benchmarks in place that were pre-pandemic, or do we need to either look at other metrics, or do we need to re-benchmark of where we are now and what we think is within the realms of acceptability? Also, the average resolution time, we're looking about 8.5 minutes now. I certainly see that going up. That handle time, that, I still think average handle time gives us a great understanding, obviously, of the cost to the business that these calls are having. And we're still looking at an average of just over 6 minutes, according to the latest forecast. But I think that's something as well that actually we're probably peaking a good deal higher than that right now. And the abandonment rate, I've seen the abandonment rate numbers, and typically we were looking between 2 and 5%, and I'm seeing a lot now that are above 10%, and I'm looking at average on about 12%. So these are some of the, the interesting metrics that we're working with. Obviously, there's a lot more, and I haven't mentioned NPS, CSAT, etc. in these, because I know we're all, looking at what we typically see is the board are looking at your NPS numbers, and the operational team, the heads of contact centers, are looking at, some of the more tactical numbers like this. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today, and I just wanted to throw a few of these thoughts out and see if we can provoke some of that about what we think needs to change and what we think actually we're just managing to keep our grips on. And I'm going to hand back over to you, Margaret. So appreciate that.
Perfect. No, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for that insight, Rachel. Really interesting stats there. And I'm sure a lot of this will resonate with many people here on the call today. So what I'm going to do now, so I'm sure you've all got loads of questions, that you want to ask Rachel. And to kick us off, I've just got a question, that I've written down yesterday. So how effective do you think your current operational metrics are for understanding voice of the customer? So if you'd like to put your hands up on the screen, and then I'll come to you when I see the hands up. And I've got you on full screen still, Rachel. Okay. So I've got actually Paul Allen from Education Skills. Paul, are you there? I can't actually, I've just seen you and you've gone up and I've seen your hand.
Hello, Margaret. Sorry, I didn't knowingly put my hand up.
Oh, right. It went up and went down again.
I can see Solomon from Sky has got his hand up. If that
yes,
helps.
I can see Solomon as well. So do you want me to kick off with Solomon and then I'll come back to you?
That wasn't a deliberate kick over the fence there. Solomon,
sorry. It was well played, mate. It was well played.
I believe you, thousands wouldn't. So Solomon, sorry, over to you.
Yeah, hi guys. So Solomon from Sky. I think just to answer the question, do our operational metrics kind of help us with the voice of the customer? I feel currently today they don't help us effectively enough. And it was really interesting, Rachel, when you covered off some of the operational metrics that we focus on, like your average handling time, etc. They certainly don't, right? They give you an understanding of how long people are spending on conversations, or Is it driven by after call work? Because the customers have got lots of things that need to happen off the phone. And when we think of NPS, you alluded to that, yeah, we get customer comments, but it doesn't really help us understand how customers are feeling. Particularly around, you mentioned this kind of cohorts and that evolution. Now we have lots of vulnerability in there. You've got the kind of gig economy. We've now got cost of living crisis right in the middle of it all. It doesn't help us because it's very emotive what we see. So I work in the sales directorate within Sky. So if customers come in and they get a good deal, they tend to score us pretty highly. But if you're a customer who's coming in 18 months later and wanting another deal, you won't get as maybe as an attractive deal as you got 18 months before. And right now that's really important. And we'll either get the really positive or the really negative. It doesn't actually help us understand what the true emotions and feelings of our customers are. It's very much of a moment in time. Just to answer the question.
It is, and I've certainly seen quite a lot of operational numbers moving towards things like call quality scoring. So to really understand, and regardless of what the topic is that the customer's calling in about, how effectively are we handling and resolving issues and questions. And I think as an operational metric, the problem with it is it's a little more difficult to measure in terms of, you know, how reliable is this measurement. But I certainly think we're seeing a lot more understanding of empathy, for example, through metrics like call quality that are coming through. But, you know, I think the question is, you know, of those metrics that we have and that we're all being measured by, are there any that we absolutely need to re-benchmark, or are there any that actually we just need to chuck out and move on and bring some new ones in that are giving us day-to-day operational insights that we can make transformation programs out of?
Perfect. Thank you for answering that, Rachel. And hopefully, Solomon, that's answered your question, or, you know, given you further insight, should I say, into that. Steve, can I bring you in on the call, please? Steve Tross, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much. Really interesting session. I just wanted to kind of explore something else that we do here at HomeServe. So I'm kind of head of operations and strategy at HomeServe, and something that we brought in here. So we're a sort of, for people that don't really know what we do, we're a home assurance kind of organization. So people will phone us if they've got maybe a problem with plumbing or, you know, electrics or those sorts of things. So something that we brought in, you know, a little while ago was we brought in a Voice of the Customer program where our frontline agents can bring to a meeting that takes place at 8 o'clock with kind of senior people in the organization, where they feel they've had an interaction with a customer and the policies of the organization just aren't working. So, you know, someone is talking about price and perhaps we're rigid about price. Perhaps they need a new boiler replacement and they're old or they're vulnerable and they can't afford the prices of the new boilers that we might be charging. So we're giving sort of our frontline staff the opportunity to come and put a case forward to say, I spoke to this customer and I really believe we should do something for this customer because this is happening, and you know, they've been a customer with us for a long time and those sorts of things. And I think what we're finding is that it's kind of increasing the loyalty that we're having with our customers. So we're finding that customers are kind of tending to renew better. So we're noticing that our renewal rates are a little bit stronger than they were, but also it's stopping a lot of frustration on the front line where people feel they had nowhere to go. You know, the rules are the rules, and, you know, it was too rigid. So what we found is that I think the chief executive put something like £250,000 into a fund to say, look, we've got this much money. If someone puts a good case, they can do that. And we've kind of been doubling that broadly year on year. And they've not stopped kind of the amount of money that we're putting in. But I'm just wondering whether other organizations are kind of doing things like that, or I don't know, just other people's views, I suppose.
Okay.
or whether we've come across other organizations that are doing something similar. We do all the other metrics. So we kind of measure, what customers are calling about. We're monitoring all of our complaint levels. We're noticing that things like complaints, around cost are kind of going up, how much a policy costs. I was interested in some of the metrics that you were pulling out. Some of them really resonated. So I think in terms of, the average resolution time, ours is pretty much bang on 6 minutes. I think the ASA didn't really. I think we're okay. We're running at about 6 seconds. We've kind of got a lot of automation in there. We brought in a lot of automation, and we're finding that last month, for example, 20% of our first-time booking calls wanting an engineer, around about 20% now of our call volume will be automated, and someone can have a policy, book an engineer, and an engineer will attend. And that's kind of relieved things a lot, really. I mean, our AHT is around about 380 seconds, so not far off the 400 seconds. And our abandonment rates are around about 2%. And I think probably automation has helped with that. So I think that's broadly where we are. And I suppose I'm kind of keen to see whether anyone else is doing the sorts of things we're doing, whether we're miles off the mark and stuff like that, really. I'm kind of new to this, so apologies if I'm going on a bit. But
no, thank you, Steve. We've got a few people with their hands up today, so I'll bring them in one by one just to see what their views are, and hopefully get a view comparison with what you're actually doing as well. Suzanne, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Yes, hi, Suzanne Meadows from Exponentially. So we're a B2B IT services provider. So I was listening to what Solomon said about NPS and not giving you the right kind of insight, and also as well you, Steve, and how you're bringing people on the front line into the conversation high up, which I think is absolutely excellent. I mean, this might not be applicable to everybody because we obviously do B2B and it's about IT services, and I 100% agree with the fact that escalations have increased during the pandemic, because I guess if you have sort of a remote working situation and your network goes down and you're kind of working in an island, it becomes very, very urgent. So we have absolutely seen that, and I think people's patience in general. People want everything resolved, quickly, once and done. And maybe that's leading to the increased average handling times. I don't know. But in terms of the way we approach things to get insight, it's probably maybe the opposite end, Steve, of what you're doing, because we do NPS, but we publish it live, which I guess be interesting to see what people think of that, because it has its pluses and minuses. Because the NPS score is the NPS score, and if you get the score, even if it's sort of not within your realm of control, the number is what it is, and it's live. But what we've done is we've integrated that into our CRM. So if there's anything below a neutral response, then we get an automatic, we get an alert to the manager of that area, and they have an SLA of responding within 24 hours to actually personally contact and reach out to that customer. So this is on an interaction by interaction basis. So we used to do the random surveys 4, 5, 6 times a year. And we've now done it on every single interaction. Whenever you raise a support case, then you get to score the NPS. And if there's anything below neutral, then we actually get the management team involved. I mean, I appreciate not everyone will be able to do this, especially in a consumer environment. But we actually then have the managers have to reach out and speak to the client and understand what's happening. So you get that feedback. You get the nuances of what's actually wrong, but you also get feedback on who actually handled that interaction. That does actually give us some quite rich kind of detail, and we find the relationship with our customers are better because of that. What's, I guess, imperfect is not all of that is tracked. That's a whole source of data we're not leveraging, so that Rachel, that's something probably, which could be quite interesting, because all those conversations is, that's data that could be mined. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of the way we've been doing things.
Suzette, thank you very much for that. Before I come on to you, Jill, Rachel, I'd just like to bring you back in, with what you've heard so far, and just to get your insight into some of the questions that have been raised by, both parties so far.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, the initial conversation, and I love what you're doing at HomeServe, and it also, and I think it couples beautifully well with further empowerment for the front line as well, because that's got a twofold benefit. It's got the benefit for the customer in terms of, you're really saving customers, not just money and saving those customers from churn, but when we look at some of those stories where hit the headlines, we look at some of the things that you're doing, they have huge benefits to the business. They may seem incrementally small, but they can often lead to a real seed change. And you said that your initial budget, you're doubling it year on year, so you're clearly seeing the benefit from that as a business. One of the things that I would like to see more of is organizations like yours sharing those stories. When we see adverts on TV, those are the types of stories now that I think consumers will really resonate with. So some of the great things that you're doing with customers, and I know you're not going to advertise the fact that you go above and beyond for some of your customers that really need it, but I do think as a practice, some of the stories that I'm seeing coming out of customer experience right now and throughout the pandemic have been extraordinary, and that's the type of TV advertising that I'd like to see, and the brand awareness that consumers are really interested and will pick up on. And I think the other side of that is that frontline agent that's able to deliver that service, that's huge for them. And when we're looking at employee experience pulse surveys, those agents that are allowed to give that little bit extra at the time, so that they get that call or that engagement right first time, they get it solved, and they get a great feeling about that. And those are the businesses that they have much higher retention levels too. So I think that's fantastic. The other comment from you, Suzette, about you've got loads of data, but there's no one necessarily tracking it and trending it. Yes, obviously, that still remains one of my biggest sort of issues, but also that's what's keeping me gainfully employed. So whilst I'm grateful to hear that, it's an issue that I certainly spend probably the majority of my time with customers, because we've all got a huge amount of data now. Often still that data is in disparate places, and the question is, how can we bring all that data now across that? We've got an ecosystem in the contact center. It's no longer just, we're recording and analyzing those calls coming in. We're seeing live chat and AI-driven chatbots, huge amount of data coming in from them as well. And the key thing is, you might not be using the same vendor for all your technologies. So it's where do you bring all of that data in as a central repository so that you can see the fault line that those customers are tripping over? Where are those key areas that, as a business you need to improve? And that's the most difficult bit. I'll be absolutely honest with you. The easy bit is bringing in that data. The difficult bit is making that data actionable and giving it to the right people at the right time, so that those agents have access to, next best actions on their desktops. The executives have dashboards that tell them actually what's today's empathy level like on across the agent floor. Yes, we need to understand our ongoing metrics, but actually from a customer health perspective, what's the pulse today? Those are the types of things that make data beautiful and really actionable.
Perfect, Rachel, thank you very much for that. And as you say, it's not easy, is it? You know, so, you know, we're all on a journey together with this, and we're not going to get there overnight, but, you know, lots to do and lots of food for thought. So thank you for that. Jill, can I come into you now? And hello again.
Hi, Margaret. Yeah, I agree. I think even, you know, hearing the conversations around here, the metrics we have, they are exactly what they say on the tin. They're operational. They don't actually give you a view of the customer. We do surveys, the CSAT surveys, we do transactional surveys. I know probably some of you guys do as well. So it's in the moment. As soon as the call's finished, the customer will get that. And then it's actually our team leaders, if there's any low scores, will actually then pick up on that and see, you know, what comments the customer is making and get back to them within sort of like a day. If it's not to do with our agents, feeding that back to the other areas, getting them to have a look at it. So that's been really key for us to try and sort of get hold of that dissatisfaction straight away before a customer becomes really disgruntled, and then, you know, in time it then becomes a complaint. But I really like the things that Steve was saying, because funny, I had a conversation yesterday about that, because I think we need to listen to the advisors. The advisors they test the temperature of the customers. So I found that in team meetings, if we have speakers in from other areas, perhaps they're changing a process, etc., it's our advisors that then can say, but, you know, customers are disgruntled about this, or have we considered that? And, you know, I think it's listening to them cross-sector to get that input, because being a call centre, we actually deal with the contact for the rest of the business. And when some of the policies we find or processes are constraining, you know, it's having that voice and getting the advisors to think that they are able to do that, getting them to be more empowered, that they can challenge things. So having something around these sort of like monthly meetings or weekly meetings, so they can have an input into that and actually get some real drive, some change. I think that will be the real key in listening to the customers. We do have a customer engagement officer as well, and we do quite a lot of work with customers, with customer groups, working groups. We ask them to review our policies and get their feedback on what that means to them, because it actually directly affects them. So for instance, like building and safety, repairs, planned works. We've sort of done a recent, our new strategy that was launched. We actually asked them to consult on that as well, to give us what they thought their views were. And we've also got for customers what's called bright ideas and suggestions. But I suppose the only thing with that is it's like you've got to not tackle, but you've got to listen to all areas to test the temperature, because there'll be some customers you'll never hear from. So it's how do you listen to them? And some of them may be the more vulnerable ones, where you say that we've not been able to do something because our policy or process says, no, you can't do it. But if we empower our advisors to think, well, hang on a minute, I think we should change something. So I suppose we're on a bit of a journey with that, but I really do like that idea, so that we can pick up on that bit that we are potentially missing. And also we've just started, we're doing I'm actually on a panel with other managers. It's learning from customers. So this is reviewing dissatisfaction and complaints. And we do a deep dive into certain areas where we know that there's dissatisfaction, but we look at it as a group from across the business. So it's managers from other areas, and looking to see, you know, what could we do? So you've got people's viewpoint that might not actually be, you know, really directly involved, but they might have a real valid point from the outset to say, you know, well, have we tried something? So I think it is a lot of communication. There is a lot of data out there, but it's how we use it in the right way. We're doing the regulator of housing is about to submit as well. I think there's like 22 key metrics or something that we're going to be looking to report on, and then that will be reported and will be I think will be ranked against other housing associations, so that'll be visible to the customer. So it'll be even more important that we do those things. And a lot of that feedback does come from surveys, but it's on how we're doing. And I'm sure if we get any sort of challenges on that, as we do now, it's just picking up on it and seeing where we can get better.
I think, thank you, Jill. Rachel, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, just quickly, Jill, because you reminded me of something when you're talking about learning from customers, because I still see within the huge amount of data that we have, one of the quickest ways of identifying how we can learn from customers, because often they tell us what they want us to do. So, run text analytics on all of those engagements and look for the terms I wish or you should. And, if anybody's not doing that, I would say that's a top tip. And you can create that learning from customers panel just by analysing what comes through on that alone. So, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's a great tip.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Jill, for that. So, Phil, I think, Phil Smith, you're trying to raise your hand, but before we do any of that, Sharon, could you put the polls on the screen? We'll go and we'll have a quick poll if you don't mind. So we've got the questions there. So the first one, what are the measures you currently use for customer satisfaction experience across all channels? So if we select one of those and we just do a 30-second on that one. And Sharon, I'm leaving you in charge of the responses now.
No worries at all. So this poll consists of 3 questions in total. If you just work your way through them. The first poll, yeah, you can choose multiple answers. That's good. You can see people are doing that. On the second poll, how effective are the measures that you currently use? For any of you that attended the Best Practice Forum earlier this month, which was also on measurement, we ran this same set of questions. So what we'll do is combine the results from today with that, and we'll issue a kind of full set of results later on. And then that third question there, collection methods and reporting, could it be improved in your organisation? So just a few more of you to complete, and then I'll end the poll. I know some on iPad and iPhone can't necessarily take part, so I'm going to close it there, and I will share results. So that should pop up on your screens. Everybody got that?
Yeah, so yeah, so there's some standout ones there, isn't there? So customer satisfaction at 67, NPS 56, and first contact resolution. They're all very, very similar in size. If you look at the second one, where are we now? So where are the question on the scale of 1 to 5, how effective do you feel the measures are? A lot in the middle of the road there, at 39%, some lower at 28 and 11, and 1 at 2, but nobody up at number 1. And do you believe collection methods and reporting of customer experience could be improved? And a huge big yes there at 72%. So, I think the majority of us are in agreement, with we've still got work to do without a shadow of a doubt. And as I said earlier, we're on a journey with all of this now as well. I'll ask the next question, and then Phil, I'm not sure, Phil Smith, if you want to come in. I know you've been trying to find out where you put your hand up on the screen, but just thinking about what improvements do you think your business can make to improve both the customer and employee experience? And Phil, I don't know if you want to come in on that.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm not a frequent user of Zoom, so sorry, I was just breaking up there, so I missed your last question.
Do you want me to rephrase it again, Phil? Or
yes, please.
Yeah, no problem at all. So what improvements do you think your business can make to improve both customer and employee experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, so it's actually leading on to something that I've been thinking about since we started, which was, I know we were talking about AHT, and how we're seeing, longer calls, more challenging calls that we're dealing with. And I'm wondering kind of how do people, so it's a question really for everyone, how do you have those conversations around AHT in a in a meaningful way, and how do you channel that message out to people to make them also, I guess, how do you make those conversations so they're not contradictory? Because obviously, I think we all agree that quality is paramount, but how do you marry those two areas, quality and efficiency, and how do you kind of have those conversations, feeding through your business and making sure that you're delivering it in an engaging way and making sure people are engaging with that challenge effectively without kind of disengaging your frontline staff by just kind of hitting them basically by asking them to be quicker, but still deliver a great service. I don't know if I've articulated that very well, but I don't know if anyone's got any views on that.
Yeah, so it's a great question. We've got a couple of hands up, so, Solomon, I'm not sure if you're responding to that, to the, what we've just had from Phil, or are you asking a separate question?
No, I was going to respond to Phil.
Perfect, thank you.
So how we do it at Sky is we've started to join up the metrics a little bit in terms of, so we have various working groups. So one looks at the efficiency side, there's always one that looks at the experience side. We've started to join up the likes of first time resolution and NPS, because we've done a bit of a deep dive into our NPS and realised that about 25% week on week, their super detractors are FTR related topics. So can't get through, didn't speak to the right person, they didn't call me back, I've been transferred from pillar to post. And so we actually started to team up to say, well, actually, we fixed one, we indirectly fixed the other. And we've started to gain a bit of traction with our execs, with our directors or leaders around how do we have those conversations that these metrics are intertwined to an extent, not all the time. And there'll be some areas that just aren't. Like EHT, I sometimes arguments with the efficiencies guys that we're talking about vulnerability and cost of living. You want people to have good conversations. So
Solomon, can I pause you for a moment, please?
Yes.
Can everybody else put themselves on mute if they don't mind? There's a lot of noise coming through on the background. Sorry, Solomon.
It's all right. I think it might have been the person sitting next to me, so just let me know. I'll tell them to be quiet. But yeah, I've lost my train of thought now.
Sorry.
It's all right. But yeah, basically what I was getting to was we started to join them up, and we're seeing a lot of traction now where we're having that joined up conversation that FTR, by improving it, will improve experience. It's not always with the advisor though. Some of that sits with other teams like our planning teams or IVR routing teams. Some of it's how we set our organisation up drives that experience. It doesn't always sit with our frontline teams. In terms of the conversation, it's really key that with our leaders, we join up those metrics. So they're not always looking at them in silo. We always find that you look at it as efficiency, commercial, experience, and you never join them up. So we've really started to lean into how do we start having that conversation with our leaders to say, they're all priorities, but you can have the one singular conversation with your teams to focus on them. So we're seeing some traction, where we're seeing definitely pockets of improvements, but there's lots more to do. And I think that's probably down to some of our business rules, tools, reporting. It's just maybe not where it needs to be. But yeah, I hope that answers the question, Phil.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Solomon. No, thank you. And Ryan, would you like to come in as well?
Yeah, hi. Solomon's just covered a bunch of stuff that we're doing here as well, which is interesting to hear as well. It's good though. So we do very similar where we compare and scatter plot our AHTs and our CSATs so we can see and trend any analysis with what a customer maybe expects of us when they come through to us. I think in terms of the conversation, it's something that I found frustrating when I joined this industry. We talk about AHT as if it's a customer metric, and it's not. A customer doesn't have a clue what an AHT is. And when we're speaking to our colleagues about that, I'm really conscious to try not to use words like AHT, because really it doesn't matter to the customer on the other end of the phone. I like to talk about value in the customer's time, because think about it from a customer's point of view. There are very, very few people in the world that are getting up in the morning looking forward to phoning any of us in this industry. It's not something that people are seeking out to do. So the less that we value their time, the more dissatisfaction we would naturally drive within that customer. A customer doesn't come to Tesco with the expectation to queue. That's our USP. but yet we'll make them wait through an IVR and navigate a complicated IVR and then come through to an agent who may have more of a concern about the AHT rather than valuing that customer's individual time. And where we've trialed this with teams, and particularly when new people into the business where we deliberately don't talk about AHT, we definitely see a increase in customer satisfaction, where the colleague starts from a position of understanding that the customer is probably not delighted to be phoning us on that day. So how do we make that resolution happen for them as seamlessly as possible and kind of as forgettable as possible as well? We don't really want them remembering the interaction. We want them to go on about their day as if whatever infraction happened that made them contact us didn't happen. And that's how we try and approach it here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Ryan. And hopefully, Phil, that has helped listening to some of your other colleagues across the business. Rachel, I don't know if you've got anything further you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, making loads of notes on that. I mean, from my perspective, I don't know if the only time I'd feel comfortable with talking to agents about AHT is in terms of if a call was resolved. So I think when you're talking about AHT and you can say, you know, these calls that you're resolving and you're resolving them in a really good, timely manner, then that's great feedback for the front line. When I think more broadly about AHT and about how it's utilized, yeah, it's absolutely, it's a tactical metric, but I think it's not one that should be used across the board because all calls or engagements are not equal. So if you've got customers calling in about specific topics, you need to be able to isolate. If you're going to use AHT as a strong metric, I think it's useful to be able to isolate call reason or call topic, so that you can understand actually these are the call reasons that are driving the longest calls, and that will signify that either there's a process that needs to be changed, or we need to continue training those frontline agents on those particular topics. So I think AHT is fantastic for business improvement, but it's not something that I would necessarily expect to have regular conversations with those frontline agents, just because you don't want to drive down call duration at the expense of having a successful outcome of that call. That's the danger, isn't it?
Perfect. No, thank you very much for that, Rachel. So I think we've got time for one very quick, I'll pose another quick question. It's one actually that I hear a lot from people across different businesses actually at the moment. We've talked a lot about metrics and analytics and everything today. Now in this new world post-pandemic, whatever that is going to look like longer term, one of the questions that I've been asked is, we talk a lot about values in organizations, and when you have teams that are 100% home working, you've got all of your metrics and everything, but how do you really bring those values to life? And that's a question for everybody, but I'm going to start with you, Rachel, with your thoughts on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and you're right, we're certainly seeing those remote workers. We're at a point now where we've settled down to a business as usual now for that hybrid employee. But the tricky part for us is there's a couple of key areas that I'm working on in quite a few focus areas, but there's a couple of key ones right now. And one is actually when you're onboarding, that whole onboarding process remotely, and how we can understand how successful that is and how we can create buddies for those new frontline agents to make them more successful more quickly, but also those agents that have successfully completed their onboarding, or they've maybe been with the business for a while, but we need to, the business evolves, doesn't it? New products come through. So how then are we ensuring that all of those agents are consistent in their approach across managing each of those topics, and the more complex of calls that are coming in as well? So we're certainly seeing a much higher level of escalations because of that. And I think we'll continue to see that for at least, probably indefinitely, if I'm honest, if we're looking at, the levels of attrition that we've got right now. So I think that for me, the question is, how do we identify these key points for those employees that they're going to go through where they're going to need an extra top-up engagement? How do we enable and understand escalations from the remote employee as well? So, which topics are driving the most escalations, which group of frontline agents have a higher level of escalations. I think that's all really valuable data for us. And obviously that is something that can really drive down AHTs if we can pinpoint some of those key themes and topics that are driving that second handoff.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Rachel. So I'm just conscious of time for everybody, and I've got no further hands up. So one of the things I'd ask you to consider, this has been a great session, by the way, so really insightful, is just to think about, would it be worth, going forward, having this as a further topic for discussion, so should we revisit it again? We've only had barely an hour, on this, so and there's lots of different conversation and different organisation, and I think it's all about learning from best practice. So what I'd ask you to do is, send something on a chat if you're interested, and we can start to work, or Sharon can look at what she can do to set up a further session on that. So that would be great. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to Rachel for sharing her insights. I'm going to hand over to you for any final words you've got before I fully close down. Rachel, please.
Thank you, and terrific. Thanks for managing that conversation today, Margaret. And this is something that we're going to continue the dialogue on, isn't it? It's never going to be a one and done. And that's the great thing about being in customer experience. It's something that's going to evolve. But I think what we are seeing now is we're moving more into this business as usual. And, we've all got the data flowing, the data's coming in, and hopefully it's coming into the right places. The question is, how are we going to continue to evolve our businesses using this data? Because we've still got, a big flip to kind of get over in terms of, the frontline agent piece, this whole remote working, although it's business as usual, it presents its own challenges. We're going to continue to see more businesses move towards flexible working, perhaps the laggards. We're going to see more government organizations that are moving towards the home working and the flexible working as well. So we're going to continue this conversation about metrics and about, what are the new metrics that we're seeing success with. If we think back, maybe 8 or so years ago when businesses started using customer effort scoring, for example, I fully anticipate that we're going to see, new flavors of metrics coming forward. I particularly enjoyed listening to those participants that talked about bringing together 2 metrics, because it makes perfect sense, and absolutely it does. I'm all for that. Some of my customers right now are bringing together 2 or 3 metrics, and there's a couple of them that have their own algorithm. So it's a dialogue that's going to continue. We've had great conversations today as well, so I really appreciate that from everyone. And obviously, I think Sam has joined. He works for our Centre of Excellence at Medallia, and he's offering if anybody wants to just have a chat with us to talk about metrics further. I'm more than happy to do that, Margaret. But fantastic.
Perfect. No, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And lots of food for thought for all of us, as we progress going forward as well. Thank you to everybody for joining today. Thank you for your questions, really good questions asked. I hope the rest of your day goes well, and we'll be in touch about further sessions. I'm seeing lots of people are saying yes, please. So which is great news. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.